You know, it seems like every time I talk about the Galaxy Z Fold 7, I get comments saying, Shane, but what about the Vivo X Fold 5? And then the other day I talked about the Vivo X Fold 5 and the fact that it is apparently going to be the world's lightest foldable phone, being somewhere under, where is it, 219 grams? See, I told you it was on there somewhere. It's also rumored to be about 4.3 millimeters thick when unfolded and about 9.3 millimeters thick when folded. It's going to have a truly impressive camera setup, a triple 50 megapixel camera setup that honestly is going to trounce the Oppo Find N5 because it's not using an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera. But then when I talk about this phone, I get comments saying, Shane, what about the Honor Magic V5? So, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to compare the rumors of the X Fold 5 to the Honor Magic V5 and try to determine which one of these looks more impressive. And spoiler alert, they both look insanely impressive. Just in case any of you are typing in the comments down below, whatever happened to the Vivo X Fold 4 or the Honor Magic V4? Well, these are Chinese phones, and there is some superstition around the number 4, so in their naming conventions, they skip the number 4. We go from V3 to V5, X Fold 3 to X Fold 5. So that's what's going on there. Now, you've already heard me talk a little bit here about the Vivo X Fold 5. We talked about how it's going to be, according to their own marketing, under 219 grams. That is exceptionally lightweight, and that does make for a really nice experience when you're holding these very large devices. We talked about how it's going to be around 4.3 millimeters, according to the rumors. And let me just source this rumor for you. It's a website called Expert Pick, and it is in collaboration with Yogesh Brar, who is, I think, a fairly well-known and reputable tech leaker. He kind of laid out a lot of different things here, okay? So it is, like I said, 4.3 millimeters thick when unfolded. So that puts it right there in striking distance of the thinnest foldables on the market. It's got that 50 megapixel triple camera setup. It's also got 90 watt wire charging and 30 watt wireless charging, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and how about, guys, a 6,000 milliamp hour battery. That is incredibly impressive, packed into a 4.3 millimeter device, even if it does have a pretty large 8-inch inner screen and I believe a 6.53-inch cover display. These specifications are extremely impressive, but there's a reason that you guys always ask me to talk about this next Honor foldable, because they look very impressive as well. In fact, word is it might have a 6,100 milliamp hour battery, one-upping what Vivo is doing by 100 milliamp hours. And we'll source this one too. It's from Huawei Central, and they are getting this information from a post on Chinese social media website Weibo, where someone asked, will the battery of the V5 be bigger than this one? And they responded, it's being translated a little bit poorly, but basically it's 100 milliamp hours bigger. That would put you at 6,100. But beyond that, very similar sized screen, 6.45-inch cover display and an 8-inch inner display, but I will point out that sourcing those specific numbers has been difficult. It's hard to find, or at least it was hard for me to find this morning exactly where that information came from. It's out there, but maybe take that part with a pinch of salt. We've also seen benchmarks now leak of the Honor Magic V5, which show that it's going to be running the Snapdragon 8 Elite, and in the benchmark it says leading version. Not exactly sure what that means, but nonetheless, Snapdragon 8 Elite, and that does compare nicely against what Vivo is doing because they are sticking with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. It is an older chip. It's going to be perfectly fine, okay? It's going to be a very, very fast phone, but if you're looking for bleeding edge specs, all right, Honor's got a slightly bigger battery, and it's got a slightly faster processor. Of course, we're getting the same 16 gigs of RAM, and it's running Android 15 at launch, likely to get 16 relatively quickly. But how about that camera setup, guys? The V5 is rumored to come with a triple camera system, a 50 megapixel primary, and then a 200 megapixel periscope telephoto of some sort, and then an ultra-wide sensor. I was unable to find specifications that I really could trust on the ultra-wide, but in terms of the primary and the telephoto, very, very impressive. I love the idea of a super high-resolution telephoto because then you can digitally crop in quite well and you maintain a very high resolution. So that is a pretty darn cool thing. And then, despite the fact that it's got this massive battery, The V5 is rumored to be under 9 millimeters when closed. Okay, let's have some context here. The Honor Magic V3 held the crown of thinnest folding phone, book-style folding phone, for quite some time. It was 4.35 millimeters when opened and 9.2 millimeters when closed. If we shave off 2 millimeters off of that, maybe more than 2, maybe 3 millimeters, this thing is going to be approaching 4 millimeters when open, or even getting into that 3 millimeter range. And that does sort of remind me of the rumors around the Galaxy Z Fold 7, which have been slightly confusing, but I've actually already kind of explained these rumors a couple of different times. We'll look at it again here very briefly because it gives context to this as well. We had heard seemingly conflicting reports, one saying that the Z Fold 7 would be around 4.5 millimeters thick, another report saying that it was going to be 3.9 millimeters thick. Well, upon my investigation, what I was able to determine is that OEMs, when they give you the measurements of their phones, they do not include the protruding bezel around the outside of the screen. This bezel around the outside, the reason it protrudes is so that when the device is closed, these folding screens don't touch each other, or any little particles don't get smashed in between the screens. They stick out usually around 1/2 of a millimeter or so. This device is marketed as being 4.2 millimeters thick, but when I took a set of calipers and measured it, it was closer to 4.5, 4.6. Samsung's bezel protrudes even further than that. So the dispute between, is it 3.9 or is it 4.5? The answer is it's both. It just depends on how you are measuring it. If you've ever wondered how these phones can be 4.35 millimeters when opened and then 9.2 when closed, those numbers don't add up. It should basically double, and yet it's more than doubling. It's because the bezel protrudes, and you have to take that into account. Personally, I don't care when we measure these phones if you're including the bezel or not. We just have to be consistent. You can't compare one phone measured with the bezel included to another phone with the bezel excluded, because you're going to be misleading people by doing that. But nonetheless, these rumors do indicate that the Honor Magic V5 could be going for world's thinnest foldable once again, while still packing in a massive battery and a potentially phenomenal camera setup. Now, both of these phones are rumored to be launching pretty darn soon. Some sources have said as soon as this month for both of them. I'm not exactly sure if that's true or not, but they both should be coming pretty darn soon. Now, unfortunately, as these are, again, like I said, Chinese phones, they're not going to be a phone that you're going to be able to walk into your local T-Mobile store and, sign a 2-year contract and get a hold of. You're going to have to import this thing if you do want to have it used here in the United States. And of course, hopefully you're going to have some sort of a global variant that's going to make that even easier. Otherwise, you're going to be running a Chinese ROM. And these barriers of entry, while not significant for some of you watching this video, because I know a lot of you already imported the V3 and Honor's last phone as well, and you had no major issues doing that, at least a lot of you didn't, I think it is a pretty major hurdle for a lot of more normal consumers, and I think that's probably where Samsung's biggest advantage lies. They're Samsung. Unfortunately, over the last several years, we've watched Samsung's Z Fold devices kind of get left in the dust. These Chinese manufacturers are thinner, they're lighter, they have better cameras, they have bigger batteries, they have faster charging, and it does seem like Samsung is at least trying to compete with some of these things, right? So we've heard the rumors, like I mentioned, it might be as thin as 3.9 millimeters if you don't include that protruding bezel, which no one does when they give the measurements. So I think that it's fair to allow Samsung to do the same thing. We're swapping out that 50 megapixel primary camera for a 200 megapixel primary camera. Granted, that 3x telephoto is still bad and needs to be improved, and hopefully that happens. Larger inner and outer screens, maybe as large as 8.2 inches diagonal on that inner screen. And the cover display is finally going to look more like a normal phone, which is great. Something that isn't, extra skinny, which has bothered me from the beginning. Of course, Snapdragon 8 Elite is going to be the processor, a larger vapor chamber. Look, they are taking steps in the direction that we want. Are they going all the way? Have they finished the race? No, absolutely not, because the ultra-wide and telephoto cameras likely still not going to be as good as some of these other phones. The battery size, the charging rate also not going to be on par. But they are Samsung, and you can buy the phone directly here in the United States through your carrier, and that makes a really big difference when you're talking about competing against these other devices. Even if they fall short of that ultra moniker that they sort of teased in that blog post the other day, which then spawned just about every YouTuber on the planet to make videos that said, Samsung confirmed Z Fold 7 Ultra is coming, which was complete and total nonsense. And to be honest, get on my soapbox for a second, I was pretty disappointed to see how many YouTubers, content creators, and news blogs did things like this. Samsung officially confirms the Z Fold 7 Ultra. No, the Samsung Z Fold Ultra is not coming literally 1 day apart. Bummer to see the tech news space go down that very obviously stupid road. But that is neither here nor there. At the end of the day, the Vivo X Fold 5 looks incredibly impressive, and the Honor Magic V5 might even in some ways, obviously I think, look even more impressive than that. And despite the fact that I do think Samsung is making some strides in the right direction, and I think that it's going to be probably the best year-over-year improvement that the Z Fold line has had since we went from Fold 1 to Fold 2, you do obviously have to question. Even with their advantages, right? They have maybe the best software around, and like I keep saying, their biggest advantage, that they are Samsung. You have to start to wonder if that is enough. Are they doing enough to keep up with these other brands? And I feel like most of you will probably say, no, I wish that they were doing quite a bit more. But I would also render a guess that most of you are probably more likely to buy the Fold 7 than to import a Vivo or Honor phone. So interesting conversation, I think, to be had in the comments down below. So definitely do take part in that. Subscribe for more content just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.